Hi there, and welcome to the Fellowship of the Ring Pool. We have switched to Wednesdays. For those of you who weren't here last week, Crow Hill has switched to a 4-day week. It's not a kind of union thing. It's not a cost-saving thing. Everyone's still on their same salaries. We have just figured out that people are a bit more productive, a bit more engaged, a bit happier if they have a 3-day break between stints here at Crow Hill. We've been very, very busy working on season 2. I think we're probably delayed by about 2 weeks, but these things are to be expected. But if you haven't joined the mailing list, please do. I cannot tell you how important that is, because there is a thing that's going to happen, and it's going to be a very limited timescale, but to celebrate the relaunch of Crow Hill. And, you know, it's been very interesting because what we've spent, I'd say 75% of the time on, is not ways of packaging the samples and setting this shop up. It's all about the resources, and I'm hoping that you'll see the emphasis is something based a lot more on that initial video I made when I launched Crow Hill. We took, I think, a bit of a wrong turn in the road where emphasis on business is concerned, and my mind about business is the activity of encompassing a group of people being busy, not necessarily about just selling samples. That's hopefully going to become an important part of the business, but just a part. So do keep an eye out for, we'll probably be soft launching the site. We won't be announcing that. But if you just keep a little eye on the site, you'll see slowly, page by page, the new design coming forth, which I hope you approve of. So anyway, we're down to a 4-day week, and as a consequence, it basically means that Thursdays are now our last day of the week, which means that we have less that we can do with this live stream on the Friday. So we've moved it to the Wednesday, and I also think that Wednesdays are a bit, I don't know, it's the middle of the week, so it's a bit of an escape before we enter into Thursday. So yeah, thanks for joining, for those of you who got the email. But as I said, just please do join the mailing list, because something really cool is coming your way for that. In fact, I think I'm going to Pisa next week to attend to something that is going to be included in that very, very exciting package. Right, what else do we have to talk about? Solstice Walk 21st up here in Edinburgh if you want to come and meet the Crow Hill gang, but also, more importantly, other composers, other music makers, other music technologists, other people who don't mind having a little walk up Crow Hill. Maybe a little tot of whiskey. I'll probably be having a coffee at the top. Coming back to have a drink and maybe a bite to eat. We'll see what the weather's like. But if the weather's good, what we might do is not end up at the pub, but there's a nice big long table in a field. We might load it up with some food and goodies. So there's where did we find out about that and get details, Simon? Nowhere at the moment. Well, put it in your diary. We'll do an email, and with the new website, there'll be an Eventbrite and all of that kind of stuff. In fact, probably actually before we launch the new site, we'll get that up. So 21st of June, Summer Solstice Walk, an opportunity to get together, to network, to exchange numbers, and to do more of this blethering that we do every week. And yeah, and the last thing to talk about before I hand over to the producer here is that we've got a new composer challenge, which is by far the trickiest challenge we have set so far. So much so, I don't expect that many people to enter. So I think the chances of winning are fairly high. We've got some UJam stuff to give away. We've got our standard clutch of Crow Hill goodies to give away, but also the chance of you selecting your favourite sample instrument and have us send it through all of this juicy stuff to create a bespoke sample just for you to use. So I think that's going to be a fun prize. You can dial in. If you're in the area, you can come in and get to use all of these squiggly bobs. So Composer Challenge, that is on the website. If you go to the website / Composer Challenge, is it hyphen? Composer hyphen or dash challenge. You'll be up and running. And there is a video on the YouTube channel, which is me making a trailer out of trash. And if you're seeking inspiration or indeed wanting some sounds, don't have a smartphone or don't have neighbors or flatmates who'd put up with you banging stuff, there is a kind of starter pack of sounds that you can use to create your own trailer track to accompany our amazing Snakes of Russia trailer, but not using the Snakes of Russia library, just using stuff that you've recorded on your iPhone. We've already had some amazing entries, but keep them coming. So, gentlemen, we always trawl the internet for questions that are being asked, questions that can be asked of me, and then everyone who joins on the Google Meet, which again is linked in the video description down below. Just join the Google Meet. There's a little mic button. Switch that off, and then when you want to speak, contribute, ask a question, answer a question, tell us of some good news, some bad news, ask some advice, just there's a little hand icon. Stick that up. And I believe next week we may actually be switching to Zoom, which is an interface that many more people are familiar with. But we're playing with that. Also, as part of the Season 2 release, this podcast, an edited version, is going to be available on all of your podcast outlets. So, gentlemen, do we have a question you thought worthy of asking the people who, it's probably going to be a small group of people today, because usually it's the Thursday, but now it's Wednesday.
The question is,
yeah.
What was your first single that you bought?
Okay.
The first album that you bought?
Mm-hmm.
The first gig that you went to? And if you can't remember any of those, what's your favourite one of each?
Okay. The first two are easy because I was older. My dad was a record collector, so I used to trawl through his records. And I think when Mum and I split up, I can say this now because they're no longer with us, I think he headed off in a hurry, so he left all of his records behind. So I basically dieted on his record collection for most of my childhood through into my teenage years. But I believe the first single I bought was Doctor Doctor by the Thompson Twins. And correct me if I'm wrong, but I believe that was produced by Nile Rodgers. I may be corrected here, but yeah, Doctor Doctor by the Thompson Twins. And then my first album, which I would have been a year or two along, and these things, it was intermittent in those days because I used to get a W.H. Smith gift voucher from my nanny for Christmas and birthday. And I believe it was Street Sounds Electro 2, which is a compilation album. And something I've often talked about on this channel is one of the greatest honours I've had of my life is to witness the birth of hip-hop. And this was back in the day before it was called hip-hop. It was called electro or rap music. And I think... was the Smurf on it? That was a good track. So Street Sounds Electro 2, Thompson Twins, Doctor Doctor, first single. First gig, I think I probably went to a classical concert before this, but I can't remember what it was or where. So the first concert I can remember is at the Albert Hall, and it was a double bill. And it was Dr. John, a.k.a. Mac Ribbenack, not supporting, but on a double bill with B.B. King, which was pretty good. And I remember being fascinated by the Albert Hall and these kind of UFO things they have dangling from the roof to try and make that barn sound any good. But I remember even back then going, I can't hear anything. The minute a snare gets hit in that room, it's very difficult to hear anything else. But that, I think, is a great question to pose to anyone who wants to join on the Google Meet linked in the video description down below. Is there anyone who has worked out that we're doing this on a Wednesday, not a Thursday, and wanting to come in? Woohoo! Oh, yes, there is. Brilliant stuff. So I don't know if, welcome all. I don't know if you guys have heard that there's a brilliant question I think we can all answer today to kick things off, which is first single you bought, first album you bought. And I love the idea of it's the one that you bought, not the what you were given. Because, certainly back in my day, buying a single or an album was a serious investment. So it took some consideration. First album you bought, first single you bought, and first gig that you went to, or concert that you went to. So if you stick your hands up, it would be great to welcome you in. It took a bit of thinking for me, certainly with the first concert, which was BB King and Dr. John. And I remember BB King broke a string, and there's YouTube videos of this. Because BB King only ever played one guitar, which I believe he called Lucille, BB King had this amazing thing that he would do whilst playing live, which was changing a string whilst continuing to sing and perform. And that was, I believe it was a Gibson that he played. So he fed it through the back, and off he went. And BB King famously played quite singular notes anyway, so I think he got away with it. So if no one's going to put their hands up, I'm going to throw people under the truck and ask them. So I'm going to go straight to you, Mandy. How are you?
Hey, all. I'm good. How are you today?
Yeah, good. Really good.
Really good.
I've got to repeat. Coming back over your speakers. I don't know if you want to turn me down, maybe? Yeah. So I'll quickly ask the question. So the question today is, what was the first single you bought? What was the first? So I'm hoping I'm using the same language that's used in America, but, the 7-inch things. First single you bought, what first album you bought, and first concert that you went to. Can you remember?
First concert was NSYNC. First albums, probably Phantom of the Opera. And then it's probably TLC back in the day. So listen to that one on repeat on road trips, and so those are probably my first ones.
Was TLC? Right, tell you what, do you want to mute your mic, Mandy?
The scrub is the guy that can't get no love. That one.
Can you mute your mic, Mandy? Because I'm repeating. Thank you so much. If in doubt, always wear headphones. I don't know why sometimes it feeds back and sometimes it doesn't. But yeah, TLC, Scrubs, what a track. And I have an NSYNC story. Were they the band that went, oh no, it's Backstreet Boys, the bum, 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 bum. Yeah, no, I did a gig and they came on after us, and I went, they're not to be messed with. But NSYNC were the same management team as Backstreet Boys, I believe, weren't they? I think there's a documentary about all that, which is sadder than you would hope. Anyone else want to volunteer what I'm going to ask Charles. Can you remember what your first single, first long-playing album, and first concert so the first single, first album that you bought, and first concert that you went to?
I believe it was the local symphony. When I was a child, my mother took me to it, and I kept thinking that the conductor looked like Santa Claus. I think it was the end of his career, and he had retired to Sarasota. And I believe they played the New World Symphony by Dvorak. Because I remember the famous theme, the Going Home theme, which was embedded in my mind to the extent that I tired of listening to it for decades. And then when I grew up, quote unquote, then I came back to it. My first single that I purchased or that I heard?
That you purchased.
Probably a Little Richard thing, maybe Long Tall Sally or Good Golly Miss Molly, something like that, which my parents had no objection to that. I mean, my dad liked Sousa, so we had I think there was a band called the City's Service Band, and they did a bunch of Sousa marches, and he played that stuff all the time. But it probably was because he'd been an officer in the war, and they were marching all the time if they weren't shooting at people. But I think it was Dvorak, and I think it was a Little Richard record. As a matter of fact, I remember when Elvis came out, I was invited to a birthday party. He had just been in Sarasota, but this is before he was famous. And then this birthday party, they had a copy of Heartbreak Hotel, which they played endlessly. And I immediately didn't like it. And so I really gravitated towards people like Little Richard and Otis Redding and those guys. And then I was listening to a lot of jazz, Miles Davis and whatnot. But that's my story, and I'm sticking to it to the extent that I can remember it.
So is that theme that you're talking about, Dvorak? Da, 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 da.
That is precisely it. And he had an interesting life. When he came to the States, I think he had a patroness, not a mistress, but a patroness who supported him and got him started in the American movie scene, and American music scene. And I believe what he did was based some of his material on folk songs that he'd heard in the United States. I could be wrong on that, but Pavel is shaking his head, so maybe I'm correct on that. But I do remember that particular concert, and there was a whole series of concerts in Sarasota when I was a child. The singer, I don't know if you've ever heard of her, named Risa Stevens, who I believe sang in the Metropolitan Opera. I remember seeing her, and then some piano player. I don't remember his name, but this was all when I was, I told you I was born in 1943, so this is way back in the 50s. But the life-changing concert, the one that was so dynamic that it was like Paul on their way to Damascus, was when and I believe I've told you this story before, Kristen. My junior high school teacher called my dad, said, "Can I take Charles to a concert?" We show up at the Sarasota Auditorium. The band was already playing. They opened the door, and it was Stan Kenton's band. In 54 or 55, and as soon as I heard it, I felt like my genetic material changed. It was unbelievable, and that's probably the thing that got me really cranking in jazz. I don't know, but there it is.
Thank you, Charles. Now, that Dvorak theme is the theme that got this country onto brown bread. Up till a certain point in the late 70s, we only ate white bread, and there was this hugely successful campaign by a company called Hovis, who make brown bread. And there was this very wholesome commercial with a brass band, a colliery brass band, playing the Dvorak theme from the New World Symphony. And it was directed by Ridley Scott. And the money he earned from that advert went towards him shooting The Duelists. And actually, if you see the Hovis ad, I'm sure you'll be able to get it on YouTube. If you see the Hovis ad, you will see very much a kind of an aesthetic style being established that he took on and put into The Duelists. So Dvorak got us onto brown bread, and if it wasn't for Dvorak, we wouldn't have Alien, probably.
Did you ever meet Ridley?
I've not met Ridley. I did see him in the street once and was surprised, he's a fellow ginger. I know I don't appear it, but I'm a recovering ginger. So was Winston Churchill, believe it or not. And he's really, really not very tall. I mean, like, I would say 5'4". I don't know what that is in American language, but really...
5'4".
Yeah.
I worked for his brother, Tony.
Right.
But that was for a series of United Airlines commercials.
Right.
And this was maybe a year or two before he had his tragedy. But he was a great guy. He was really great to work for. Very thorough.
I mean, what's interesting about the Scott brothers is that they made films when they were like tiny, tiny kids. You know, in the days when, you know, there was no technology. They were doing it on Super 8, editing it in camera and stuff. And then they set up Scott Free, or Ridley Scott Associates, actually, I correct myself, which was this hugely successful advertising company. And it's insane how many adverts Ridley Scott directed before moving into film. But yeah, the Hovis ad being a very famous one of his, and also that Super Bowl ad for the launch of the Macintosh. But yeah, and it's very interesting. When you watch Alien, there is just, I would say, for the first 7 minutes, there's an attention to detail that is very much that of an ad maker. And then you can feel the pinch as the producers were going, you know, you've spent 3 months cutting together this 7 minutes. Get on with it. Mark Bellinger, how are you, sir?
Hello, Christian.
You're very, very quiet.
I'm very, very quiet. How's that? Is that better?
Yeah, I'm getting, it's a bit better.
It's a bit better.
Yeah, you go.
What about if I bring that down and then put
Oh,
it there?
yeah, look at that.
Maybe I've got a big noise gate because I was doing stuff. That's the thing, isn't it?
Yeah.
I'm brilliant. Yeah, no, I've been driving all across Europe doing stuff for a couple of weeks, back in the office, just happy to, you know, when you go like on a trip, you're happy to be going on a trip. And as soon as you're on the trip, you can't wait to be back in your own bed again. It's sort of been a bit, it's weird, isn't it?
Yeah.
But yeah, no, back in the office. And I'm very lucky, as you know, to have a sauna in my garden.
We've seen
And
you in it.
I know, but I had no intention of doing the latest competition. I thought, I'm too busy. I haven't got time. I've got a million things to do. And I was sitting in the sauna and I just sort of, there was the noise of the pebbles on the thing. And anyway, I won't go on, but yeah, I ended up doing something just purely, I really didn't think I'd take part in that. I thought, I've got £1 million worth of samples here. The last thing I want to be doing is making new sounds and all that nonsense. So anyway.
Well, talking of making samples, we're going to launch season 2 soon, and I try not to sell stuff here on this podcast, but we're launching season 2 soon, and there's going to be an amazing kind of launch gift, which we are in the process of making, and involves me going to Pisa to get something that I have wanted all my life, and I would call it the Ark of the Covenant, where music tech is concerned. So I'll let you take bets on what you think that is, and it'll probably be revealed to you next week.
Has it got anything to do with the tower?
It's got absolutely F all to do with the tower.
Okay, all right,
Sorry, I'll repeat that. I won't censor myself. Free speech and all that. It's got fuck all to do with the tower.
Do you know what? You asking the question? Do you know, I learned so much on this podcast. I would say about 99.9% of everything I hear on the podcast, I'm just learning. And, you know, sometimes when you listen to stuff, yeah, I know that. On this podcast, I'm just learning almost the whole time. I just love it. Absolutely love it. And when you said, "Oh, what's your first album? What's your first?" I thought, oh, Jesus, because I'm your age. You were born in 1971, weren't you?
I was, yes.
Yes, me too. April. So we're the same age. So first single was easy. It was January by Pilot. January, don't be sad. Yeah. I think on the B side was Whoa, oh, oh, it's magic.
Well, I know that.
Yeah, okay. I think that was on the B side. Might be wrong. But that was the first one. And then when you started talking about albums and concerts, I've never been a big concert goer. I don't know why, but I'm pretty sure my first concert was either the Everly Brothers in Brighton, which was amazing, or Big Country at the Brixton Academy. Can't remember which one was first. Probably the Everly Brothers, but the album. The only album I can think of buying, and it's sort of weird because of what I'm sort of doing now and what a lot of you guys do, was the Star Wars album. John Williams, you know, the opening theme, Princess Leia's theme, the Cantina Band, the Imperial March, the whole, and of course that made me realise that in those days, someone like John Williams would have produced a suite of music, of which sections would have been used, but never the whole thing in the movie. So I think that's my.
So without Googling and without reaching into your record collection, actually, because you probably read the sleeve notes, you'll know this. So anyone gathered here know what recording studio that was recorded in? And it's a QI question that would probably get you one of those clangers, because everyone always says the same studio and it's always wrong. Anyone?
Burbank, California. That's probably wrong.
It was well. Okay, the story. I mean, I do actually. I'm going to, there's going to be a bit of name dropping today because I've had an interesting day. But I met with Morris. Oh, what's his name? Oh, jeepers! It's disgrace. There's a trumpeter, Morris, who basically John Williams went to see the London Symphony Orchestra and saw the lead trumpeter and said, "I'm going to write this thing for this guy." And Morris, they got in contact with him and they said, "Would you like to? We'll fly out to Boston and we'll shoot the score out in Boston with the Boston Pops." And he said, "No, if you want me, you've got to use my band." So he's kind of attributed with the American exodus to coming and working with their LSO.
It was Maurice Murphy.
Maurice Murphy, that's right. I did have the pleasure of working with him on a couple of occasions. His tone was just unbelievable. So that's why they worked with the LSO. But it was at Denham Studios, which is west of London. And believe it or not, the first Star Wars score that was recorded in London was Return of the Jedi. That was recorded at Abbey Road. But both Star Wars and Empire Strikes Back were recorded at Denham. Whenever you listen to the original recording of the first Star Wars film, or Episode 4, there's always a euphoric recall on how mega it sounds. It's actually it sounds honestly like it's recorded in this room. It's like so tight. But yeah, Denham was down the road from both Shepperton and Pinewood Studios, so it was convenient for directors to get to. So there you go, a little bit of trivia there. Does anyone else want to volunteer what their first... Jeremiah, how are you?
Yeah, I'm doing all right over here. It's nice to be at this here meeting. It's always nice to come every week. I was thinking of your question, and I thought of all of the embarrassing shows and albums that I've bought over the years. I won't actually mention my first one because I am too embarrassed. However, I will say the first album that really resonated with me was, and this might be embarrassing in my own right, is a Kiss Greatest Hits album. It's what made me fall in love with
makeup.
The idea
Sorry.
of. I mean, I guess a little bit. It was the showmanship. It was like it made me fall in love with showy rock and performance, because when I grew up, my dad would play like a lot of classic rock, or even just earlier, I guess, rock in a way. I listened to Beach Boys, Roy Orbison, things like that growing up, and still really resonate with it. However, there's something about that Kiss record that I still have it, and it really got me excited. And we were on a road trip in California going down to Disneyland. I was a really young kid, and it was just my brother with his CD player turns to me and says, "Hey, take a look at this." And I had just bought my own CD, and I was like, whoa, I did not realize at that age that things could be that campy. And I just loved it. And ever since, I maybe don't love the band for many reasons, but I still have a soft spot for them and their music. And then as far as concerts go, I remember the first concert I can remember is going to Avril Lavigne with one of my mom's coworkers' kids. We banded together and went to Avril Lavigne in her second tour. For those who do not know Avril Lavigne, she's a CanCon pop hero, and I don't really listen to her. I didn't really listen to her at the time, but I think it's a fun little nostalgic memory. And I mean, she's still rocking out. So
she's still rocking out because she started when she was like in utero almost. She was so young. She was like 14, I think, wasn't she? Yeah, and she's one of the many. I always say, like, living in Scotland's a little bit like Canada in the sense that you can't believe how many bands from the UK are actually from Scotland, considering it's a tiny population. And it's the same with Canada. The number of people you think are American and are actually Canadian. Captain Kirk is Canadian. And I'm right in saying Avril Lavigne is.
Yeah,
I shouldn't use past tense yet. Sorry.
I think if I'm remembering correctly, she might be from Vancouver Island as well. So, neighbors in a way, I guess. Yeah. And I guess on a similar note, you asked about singles. I think the first single I remember purchasing, because I collect vinyl as well, is Salt and Pepper Push It. And it was an extended mix on there. And something about it, that song just slaps.
Well, that takes me back. It really does. Something that you were talking about, Mark, of like picking stuff up on this podcast. I was having a lunch with an absolute legend today, a gentleman called Gary Barlow, who's playing the Usher Hall tomorrow in Edinburgh, and we were talking about a point at which so we consider ourselves to be like technically proficient and this kind of stuff. But I think as you get older, you realize that you're using modern technology in exactly the same way that you were using it like 15 years ago, maybe even 20 years ago. And he was saying that he's got an assistant who stands behind him just tutting when he's watching him use Logic. All of these new AI features, I'm not going to bother with those. I don't know if anyone else... And one of those amazing things, I don't know if it's something that you guys have experienced, is when you watch someone else using kits that you're really familiar with, and how there's always like those facepalm moments where you go, fuck! Literally, I'm talking 2 weeks of my life I could get back had I known that hotkey or that little maneuver. I don't know if anyone's got any ones that they recently discovered. There's a girl who's based out in, I say girl, a young woman who's based out in Las Vegas who does Instagrams about Logic stuff. And the number of face palms I do with that is incredible. I don't know if anyone else has experienced that. It was wonderful to meet Gary Barlow. He's probably less well known in the States, but he's the front man of Take That. But also, if you ever have the pleasure of going to one of his concerts, he has the most incredible songbook that I think is only second only to Elton John. And he's a bloody lovely bloke. So I'm really looking forward to going to see him tomorrow, and I won't stand over his shoulder tutting at how he's using his tech. Mark?
Yeah, I think I can relate to what you're saying. I love technology, and I do a lot of stuff with technology. As you know, we're doing the virtual reality movies and all this sort of stuff, which is pretty cutting edge. But I think the analogy I would use is like Excel. Most people use Excel to add up a column of figures. And I'm sure the people that made that software are like, oh my God, do you not realize how a friend of mine back in the day, I remember he did essentially a football manager program that was in Excel. It did all the math behind the scenes. And wouldn't you say that because, I use Cubase, and I'm aware that there are so many things in Cubase that I probably don't use, and I'm embarrassed to, but I sort of think if I'm using the tool to knock out something that I go, like we were talking the other week with Andy, was going, if you're happy with what you've knocked out, then go with it. Mm-hmm. And I think it's a point where you can sometimes be almost frozen to not doing something because you're like, you know, there are some, for example, in the new Cubase, there's these modulators. I've even watched videos with people going, "Oh, there's these new mod." I've no idea how to use those at all, so I don't. I just don't, because all it would do is mean that I don't produce anything and I don't get stuff done, and I feel embarrassed about it. I won't lie, but is it not a case that you should get stuff done, make stuff the way you can make it?
It's interesting
you
you said. Sorry, carry on, Mark. I didn't mean to interrupt.
I think you could just end up sometimes not making something because you're afraid, particularly like you might have even made, I mean, I'm one of the world's best people I'll finish a composition, which sounds sort of okay, and then I'll spend 4 hours mixing and mastering because I know I'm meant to, and 4 hours later, it sounds like shit. It was a lot better 4 hours ago before I started mucking around with lots of things I've no business touching. So what do you think? Should people just...
Well, it's interesting because just before coming on, I saw an Instagram clip of Brian Eno talking about digital technology. And he said, you know, when you first get plasticine, it might be called something different in America, modeling clay. And it's all the different, colors and stuff. But after 2 weeks of playing with it, it's just this kind of purpley grey thing. And he said that's what digital technology is like, because you don't commit, because the tape, there's no tape oxide that can get kind of worn out and stuff, that you just keep adding and adding and adding, and it grows into this kind of mulch. And I think something really inspiring that I apologize if I'm bringing this up, if I'm plugging this again, but Reverb just put out a Bootsy Collins video. It's about the boot cave, he calls it, which is, it's like a studio tour. And he talks about his effects units and how basically he has 4 outputs from his bass that go into 4 different effects chains. And he talks about how the effects react to his playing and his playing reacts to the effects. And it is totally counterintuitive to people who work in the digital domain, where effects are ostensibly, like in Photoshop, I think, adding layers, as opposed to adding something to the performance environment that you then respond to, which I think is very interesting. I don't know if anyone else has any thoughts on that digital desire to stack, as opposed to creating an environment in which a responsive environment. So it's much more of an interplay between the technology, the instrument, and yourself. And the other thing I just wanted to bring up, along your talking point, Mark, is I have a couple of friends who have purposely switched doors simply so that they're not using the same tricks and shortcuts all the time. So they focus more on the music, more on the sequencing and the recording, as opposed to a set of hotkeys that gets them from A to Z that much quicker. And I don't know if that's something that anyone else has tried doing. I'm not directing that question at you, Elliot, but you have had your hand up for a bit.
Hey, can you hear me?
Yeah. How you doing?
Yeah, not bad. How's everything? How's it going?
Yeah, good.
I'm looking forward. I'm coming up on for the Composers Walk. Managed to find flights up from Essex for like 30 quid. So
awesome.
I think I'm in Edinburgh for less than 24 hours. But
what's the airport in Essex? Stansted.
I'm like 40 minutes away from Stansted. They used to do flights from Southend, which is like 20 minutes down the road, but unfortunately I've got to get a lift to Stansted and back. But it should be fun. I've never been to Edinburgh before, so what a good occasion to come up. That
will be fun, and you will thoroughly enjoy it. It really is a really beautiful city, and coming up to climb up the hill is definitely a tick that should be a box that should be ticked. For those of you who don't know UK geography, Stansted is English for hell on earth. It is literally the worst airport on the planet. It is unbelievably awful. But you've got Edinburgh to look forward to, and it's landing in Stansted is fine. It's just taking off that's a nightmare. I don't know if you agree with me there, Elliot.
I think I'm always so excited that I'm going on holiday when I'm there that I kind of zone out the pools of teeth and the blood piles and everything else you walk past to get to the gate.
Yeah, absolutely horrific. I don't know if you've got any thoughts on your first single, album, and concert.
God, I don't think I ever bought a single other than an iTunes. I think my first album was Busted's second album, which is probably a bit embarrassing to admit to, but I loved it. Still do, to be honest. And it was quite cool. I used to work for a guitar store, and one of the guys, James Bourne, actually came in, and I sold him a load of guitars for a tour that he did, which was kind of quite a cool thing, you know, to serve someone who's like your first album you bought. The first concert I went to was Status Quo, I think. My brother got tickets for Status Quo. Something like the Search of the Fourth Chord tour or something. That's the slogan for it, In Search of the Fourth Chord. That was really cool. I think my second concert was Muse, a bit of a contrast, but there you go.
Status Quo kicked off Live Aid. I remember that. Rocking all over the world. And
I think I was alive.
I was having this very common. It's funny. They call it the Bieder-Meinhof phenomenon. That something that you find out about, you see everywhere, or something you've not talked about for ages suddenly in the same day. So I was talking about Live Aid and Status Quo today, and I don't know if you are aware that Led Zeppelin reformed for Live Aid. This is after the demise of John Bonham, and their set is basically has been deleted from history. Basically what happened is there was a gentleman called Phil Collins who was the recovering drummer from Genesis and had become the lead singer of Genesis. And he did this extraordinary thing, which was to do 2 gigs on 2 continents in one day. So he did his first leg in Wembley at Live Aid, and then he flew Concorde over to Philadelphia to do his second gig, of which he was depping the deceased John Bonham on drums for Led Zeppelin. And they did Stairway, and he clearly hadn't listened to Stairway, but also Stairway's like this finely crafted symphony where you're familiar with every tom hit, every cymbal crash. And yeah, if you watch the Led Zeppelin set Live Aid on YouTube, if you've ever done a gig, you'll see that look in Page and Plant's eyes of, this is the worst gig of my life. And it's in front of the biggest audience ever gathered on television. And it is just this, like, Phil Collins is a good drummer, but it's like this pub drummer who is just absolutely cranking it through Stairway to Heaven. And it's just, honestly, for anyone who's ever done a gig, watching this you'll be round the back of the sofa with white knuckles. It is so unpleasant to watch. To see the worst gig of Plant and Page's entire careers, Led Zeppelin, with big smiling Phil Collins, who's absolutely fucked because he's just come off Concorde. So that's worth looking.
It's not quite as big as Live Aid, but I was playing with my function band down on the Southend seafront on the pier, the big mile-long pier that's there. And we were playing Teen Spirit, I think. And you have a brain fart and you just forget how to play the guitar. They came to the big solo. I don't know what I played. It definitely wasn't that solo. And on top of that, we're quite close to the radio tower for the lifeguards. And my wireless started cutting in and out because of the frequency crossover on the wireless, which was that was an interesting 4 minutes that never want to relive.
Well,
but to come back to your things like the facepalm moments, I remember getting Logic and doing my first recordings of drums, all this kind of stuff, and thinking, and I couldn't quite get settings right on gates and compressors or whatever. So I went through and I trimmed up every single kick, tom, snare, faded it, and then someone showed me strip silence, and it was like, oh my god, what a waste of time for for what? Control X for like versus 4 hours of cutting and fake.
Yeah, someone
Trip Silence is a good one.
someone showed me Tab to Transient recently, and it's like, how long have I been making samples? Nick's eyebrows just went poof. Yeah, I was like, yeah, that was a facepalm moment.
That spinal that story with the radio frequencies cutting in, that's the Spinal Tap bit, isn't it?
Yeah.
When they're at that airfield and they're like, so what time are we on? And he goes, well, you go on at 1930 hours and you're off by 2000 hours. So what are we on for, like 50 hours? That was the bit. And then they go on, and the radio frequencies start messing with the Nigel Tufnell guitar, as it were.
I mean, I really lament the fact that none of the people I work with here at Crow Hill, they're all too young to have seen Spinal Tap, and it's such the archetypes they create in that are just so spot on. And considering they're not English actors as well, the accents, that kind of mid-Atlantic, late 70s, early 80s accents that all all British bands had, absolutely brilliant. And you know, I don't know if you've noticed. Again, this is something that I pointed out to my team here. They never question why quite a lot of things go up to 11 and not 10. So the BBC iPlayer, posh BBC, the BBC iPlayer app goes up to 11, and that's because of Spinal Tap.
You know that the IMDb goes to 11 on Spinal Tap, as a matter of fact. Like it has 11 stars on that movie. Like it's 8.2 out of 11 there. So yeah.
I have to say the underrated performance in that film is the woman who plays Janine. It is so well observed, so absolutely brilliant. Too much Dobley.
They recorded it in Dublin.
Yeah.
Oh man, that movie. David St. Hubbins, the patron saint of quality footwear, is my favorite bit.
But also, you know, I don't know about you guys, but I'm not a fan of a comedy song. But they are the line, you know where you stand in a hellhole. It's just big bottoms talk about mud flaps. My girl's got them. Big bottoms drive me out of my mind. How can I leave this behind? It's just, it's Shakespearean. It's brilliant. Elliot, back to you. You got your hand up.
I'm just saying, you said you've gone down to a 4-day working week, so they've definitely got time to watch it now. You should, I think you should set some homework.
Yes. No, I'm thinking of actually doing a little mini club here because there's so many references that I pose. And I'm and this is maybe something for us to talk about in a more serious sense, is something I'm always really keen to do, is to redirect people back to the source of things that have been copied. I think, you know, to get influences and your own heritage is absolutely what we all do. We all stand on the shoulder of giants and stuff. But so often I will find people copying the copiers, and I think that that's bad for the kind of artistic gene pool. So for me, it's like, okay, I know that you're watching this, but and that person's talking straight into camera, but you really should look at that Woody Allen film, which is the first time that was done. And so not just music references, but film references. And I know I've said this story before, but I remember having an assistant going into his writing room, and he was doing some music that sounded very confused to me. And I said, what are you like aiming for? And he said, I want it to sound like Jamiroquai. And I went, I just want to stop you there. You want it to sound like Stevie Wonder and Kool and the Gang, and you know, the originators. I think it's good to try and trace those roots back and get a kind of grounding. And Spinal Tap, so influential. I don't know if anyone's got their favourite lines from Spinal Tap, and maybe we're showing our age here, but yeah, absolutely brilliant. David. Oh, really?
I couldn't resist that temptation. Did you ever see the video that they got together to do about jazz way after the fact, the same Spinal Tap crew? Have you seen it, Christian?
Yes.
there's some great lines in that where, you know, they're going, jazz, it's all mistakes, right? It's, you know, and they rip away on it, and there's a punchline at the end goes, and they're teaching it in college. So that was one of my favorites, because there is much debate on the jazz scene over here with the industry that has become jazz education. So they had to have been clued into that somehow, because there's that debate about the jazz courses in college being kind of sausage factory like in terms of what they're churning out, and a lot of guys, you know, the Berkeley guys back in the day were all doing this kind of, but a little day, and we used to do it as a joke on the gig. But I'm old enough to remember that shift when you got to study with somebody if you were lucky, maybe get one lesson out of it. With me, it was 5-hour lesson with Pat Martino that changed my life. I'd been self-taught up to then, and I couldn't afford to go to the Guitar Institute of Technology where he was teaching right before. But just as I signed in, was there a question about the first album you bought and the first single and the
first concert?
The first concert. Well, the first concert I think I was allowed to go to see was from you guys up north, Gallagher and Lyle. To this day, I love those guys. Their harmonies, their songs. Red Rose Speedway by Paul McCartney was the first album with my own money. And single, I bought 3 that I remember at the same time. And remember when 12-inch singles around the punk era became a thing? So I just remember, I Knew the Bride When She Used to Rock and Roll. Who's that? Nick Lowe was the originator, but he was the producer on this. Welsh guitar player and singer. But, you know, they're embedded in my memory. You know, that's where I go back to. They're it's like a favorite photograph, or no matter what jazz musicians I've played with or get to play, I go back to these memories too, musically.
Yeah, there was something really, it was about the investment that you made. Something I experienced with Spitfire actually was that the people downloading labs, if it didn't work for them on their computer or they couldn't get it working, they just abandon it. But if people bought something that was expensive that didn't work, they would really work hard to make it work. And I think that if you put a value on something, you dedicate time to it. And I think there was something about that thing of maybe once a month buying an album, and you'd sit down and there'd be a bit of a routine. It'd be a quiet moment. And I just sound like an old fogey here, but it was that gatefold. And you just stare at the faces of these magicians who had made this music and these mysterious names they had. And I remember the first time I bought a compact disc, opening those fucking jewel cases and going, this is a really shit piece of design. I don't want to read this thing. It's like a pamphlet that you get at the bottom of a hairdryer. Mr. Jack Baggins, I don't know if you've contributed yet, or hi, how are you doing?
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Oh, sweet. I'm doing all right. How are you?
You're very good
I
indeed,
joined a little
thanks.
bit late. I don't want to switch the tides of conversation too much, but before I forget, for anyone doing this scoring competition, I don't know if anyone else noticed, but it seems that if you record a video, the audio in a video is better quality and a lot less white noise than a voice memo is recorded.
Ooh, that's interesting. I feel a YouTube video
An actual
coming
software thing. So I just, in case anyone hasn't recorded their sounds yet.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Yeah, that would be a good topic. But if anyone hasn't recorded their sounds yet, it's definitely more work having to go and convert the video into audio. At least for my Ableton, everything has to be WAV files, so I have to convert everything. But
it wouldn't surprise me. It's something that I've always done, where when I want to play a file on my Mac, I mean, I know that we probably don't use this anymore, but I would never ever use iTunes because it just sounded appalling. Even though the file type was no different, it always sounded to me much more like it sounded when it came out of Pro Tools, when you just played it out of the Finder. So I think there's
How
all sorts of tomfoolery going on there. It's certainly what I noticed. My stuff was recorded on voice memos, and there's an enormous limiter on it. So I wonder if that's what it is. I wonder if the idea is with voice memos, it's up close, dynamic, so they stick a brick wall limiter on it, which would bring the noise floor up compared to.
Yeah, you're probably right.
Yeah, and probably not. I guess their thinking is if you're recording some audio, it wants to be audible, whereas if you're recording a video, it's kind of it doesn't matter. It's whatever it is would account for it. But that's certainly something worth investigating. Absolutely. Yeah.
Just not a check.
Yeah, I mean, it's a good tip, Jack, and something definitely I will try out. In fact, the Nespresso machine I used to create my bass line, again, if you haven't seen the video, it's Can You Make Trailer Track Out of Trash? The Nespresso machine I used, that was the one that I used with a video, whereas the rest were voice memos. And actually, it's interesting you said it. I found that the voice memos were incredibly dry, so it was like the microphone became more directional. And I don't know if the iPhone has just one microphone in or two. Maybe it's using a different combination. I think it's got two mics in. Elliot.
Yeah, I want to say there's multiple.
Okay, right. Elliot.
Oh, what I was going to say is I think on iPhones, I think from the 10 upwards, it's something like it's got a mono mic at the bottom and stereo on the camera. And I think it uses the stereo one for phase inversion to give a cleaner signal. So if you're recording video, I think it might be a stereo mic. I could be wrong on that, but I think it's a stereo mic on the back of the cameras and it's a mono down there. So if you're using that to record your signal, it's be great for catching kind of like snares and stuff like that. But yeah, different sound at the top, but going to be noisier as well. I think that's what it was. I remember I looked at it ages ago because I was trying to find the best way to record. I did some work in a school. I think what's the best way to capture some of their GC performances if they have to do it on a day when I haven't got all my equipment there. And I remember Googling what microphones an iPhone has.
No, that's absolutely fascinating. So a good tip there. Mark? You're muted, mate. There we go.
What an amateur. I don't know, honestly. How many weeks does it take to get it right? I don't know if this helps the conversation. I used, when I was doing mine, a thing called Life Recorder by XLN. People aware of that?
No.
I don't know how it was using the phone, but it's called Life. Is it Life Recorder? Yeah, Life Recorder by XLN. I don't know how it's recording, but it's using the iPhone to record it, and then it puts it in the cloud, and I used it from there. So, yeah, I don't know, but I hadn't even thought about how an iPhone's recording, which microphones it's got on it. But anyway, it seemed very good. It was very easy to use just to record short.
It's something that I'm noticing that that technology companies are recognizing the need for. So I use these small little DJI mics and stuff. And the first generation of those, the mics were just effing it appalling, just like totally unusable. But the new mic on this Osmo thing is absolutely brilliant. I think that they've clocked that people will tolerate bad those. Oh yeah, is that the sorry, Elliot's just showing me a black box. Is that the Lav?
It's the Rode Wireless 2's 32-bit float. Fantastic.
Okay, that's a good tip. We're using the DJI ones that aren't 32-bit, I don't think. But the stuff on the DJI, it's interesting. I think that and you know, this is important for us. I think that people are realizing that people will put up with bad picture quality, but when it comes to bad sound quality, people would just switch off. So there was an absolutely fascinating Q&A with Quentin Tarantino that was shot. It was clearly shot a bit guerrilla, but the sound quality I had to switch off within a minute because you have to concentrate so hard. but also because of the variety of devices people are listening to now. Clarity is absolutely key, I believe. So I'm really actually impressed by how improvements are being made on these different devices. Charles, over to you.
To Jack's point about the difference in mics, which I was unaware of, I think it opens up the opportunities for us to do something with the mono mic, if it is a mono mic, and something to do with a stereo mic, and then you can really play around with the sounds depending on what you're recording. I think it gives us more flexibility. So I'm really happy that he told us that, because it's probably going to improve the quality of what those of us who want to get in the contest. I don't know if I'm going to do it, but the point is I do record stuff for my own purposes because of what I'm doing for my guy in LA, because I want to create my own little sounds for him. And I thought, God, this would be great, because he would, meaning my customer, he would love it if I could change the tonality or whatever. So it's like having a mic cabinet, if you please, where you have dynamics, you have a variety of brands of microphones. I think it's a terrific idea. And what is this one that you lifted up, Elliot? Does that hook up to the iPhone?
I think it can do. I've never done it. I always used it with like cameras and stuff like that.
Oh, okay.
But I believe on the main receiver, it's got a stereo out to go in, which is cool. The only thing is you're not going to get the 32-bit flow. If what you're recording it into doesn't take that, it's not going to work. But these things record into themselves, so you can literally just turn it on. It will start going, and you can just talk into it like whatever, and then drag it off over USB, and you'll get the full 32-bit flow file that way. But yeah, use these for recording weddings and wedding speeches, and it's saved us a few times.
Yeah,
you can take it to the divorce proceedings too. But Christian, what is this microphone you were talking about? Does that hook up to the iPhone?
The DJI, yes, it can hook up to a phone camera. It's got its own internal. There's a Zoom device, which they're brilliant because they have an internal microphone, but you can also plug a lav mic in and they record internally, but are also controllable from Bluetooth from a phone, and they're 32-bit. And the advantage of, I don't really understand it, but the advantage of 32-bit is you don't really need to set the gain, provided, the main thing to not worry about is overloading if you're recording at 32-bit. So you could just plug them and play, and off they go. But I'm encouraged by that's something that I found really tiresome about camera equipment and these small devices, was the poor quality of recording. And it's funny kind of being involved in film and post-production and not understanding why sound was so difficult. Sound was so, the amount of ADR that has to be done, the amount of repairs and this, that, and the other, until I started making films, or indeed, certainly with the big company I used to work with, Spitfire, we'd have these big crews on, and you're watching the pounds just tick away. And all of the onus is on the picture, and you can see how sound is so difficult to capture on location because you're in the way, or you're stopping, a crew of maybe 15 people from getting on with it because you want to reposition this, that, and the other. So it is funny how something that's totally, I think, evolved from the medium of radio and stuff, but I guess it's possibly because film started without sound, so it is always the poor cousin. It's very interesting. There's some films shot now. I know that the entire Lord of the Rings series, and this is probably it sounds like a nightmare to you, Charles. The entire Lord of the Rings series is fully ADR. So none of it is live location sound, and that is basically so that they can just literally punch out the dialogue and do all the foreign language versions. And for those of you who haven't been involved much in film, there are actually foreign language prints that go out, and because of piracy, and a lot of piracy comes from these, when they send out a print or a file with the original dialogue in dubbed for the various territories to record the local actors dubbing. A lot of the piracy came from those. So there are now foreign language versions, prints of films that go out with the entire screen matted except for the lips. So you've got these weird films with just lips floating around so they can do the lip syncing. And just another thing that which might be common knowledge to everyone, but not to all, is that what happens is you will get the same actor will dub the same, American or English speaking actor for throughout their career. So it must be weird being like a dubbing artist and just going, I hope it's going to be the next George Clooney, and then we go on.
They're in film. When I was in LA, I would get called in to revoice certain actors who couldn't show up.
Yeah,
but I want to kind of regress to last week. You said something, and the gentleman who has UJAM said something, and I thoroughly disagree with both of you, and I want it public knowledge.
Okay.
You said, and you have said it before, that you cannot read music, and that gentleman said he cannot read music, and I absolutely disagree with you, because you are reading music. You're a brilliant reader of music. You just read with your ears. And that's reading music. Because I have worked with so many musicians professionally and as a kid with amateurs, excuse my language, they could read any note you could put before them, meaning the black dot, if you please, or the half note. But they did not read music. I don't know what the hell they were reading, but whatever came out of their instrument was not music to me. The guys that could read music were reading here. The music, you're translating a thought into action. It doesn't have to be off a piece of paper. So from now on, I don't ever want you to say you can't read music, because you can read music better than a lot of musicians that I have worked with who look at sheet music and they don't know what they're doing. Amen.
Yeah, thank you very much, Charles. That is helpful. Do you know what it comes from? And I think it's a good subject to touch on. I don't know if we'll have enough time to really cover it today, but you know where it comes from. It comes from conditioning. It comes from conditioning from the way that music certainly was taught, and I think in certain spheres it is still taught. This huge snobbery that I remember being interested in the clarinet, and I had this guy teaching me clarinet, and he had me do scales for a year. I didn't play a single note of music for a year. And I just think there's something despicable about making music a solely academic pursuit, particularly when you're talking about kids who find something they're interested in. I know addiction is a very, very kind of complex subject, and this, that, and the other. But I lost, out of my friend group, I would say I lost between 10 and 15% of my friends to drugs, like as in they died. And I know in certain parts of America, for a certain generation, that number is way, way higher. And I think the one thing, if I looked at the one thing that and this is not about class or socioeconomic group or anything. I know lots of people who went to Eton and came out with terrible coke habits, but if there's one thing that unified and I'm talking about the friends I lost to death, but so many of them became drug addicts and had real problems with drugs and alcohol. The one thing, the people who escaped without an addiction out of school, from what I observed, were the kids who found some form of vocation, whether that be football or rowing or horse riding or learning the fucking guitar. And any interest that a child has or a young person has should be supported and encouraged in whatever way they can continue with that interest. And this is what makes me angry. And I've sometimes said, it feels like I hold a grudge, but it's absolutely my mission with Crow Hill to undo this idea that you cannot compose, enjoy, make music. As Prince said, making your own music is heaven. It's one of the best escapes, the healthiest escapes. And it angers me so much when you have people who have found this connection and you get educators who are going, well, sorry, if you don't learn how to music's, go and work in a restaurant, which is exactly what I did. I didn't go to music college because I refused. I didn't have the theoretical knowledge. I still, to this day, I look at a stave. I've been looking, I'm going to swear, I've been looking at those fucking 10 lines since I was 5 years old, and I still can't figure it out. It's just not the way that my brain is wired. But I think it's despicable when educational authorities or teachers put people off something that connects them vocationally with the world around them and the life that they're living, so they're not on a street corner. I find it utterly aggravating. And, whilst I'm on my soapbox, we had a culture minister, the culture minister in this country, saying that she felt that the arts shouldn't be taught in schools because they didn't lead to careers. I wanted to grab her by the scruff of the neck and go, so you don't watch the fucking telly? What about the person who designed, the leaflets that you hand out on the street to get votes? You don't think that they studied art? Anyway, I will shut up.
Well,
David,
I agree with
Charles.
I agree with everything you said. These things, the very things that you said, and I've seen it all my life. People create these barriers to entry, and they think, and I don't know where they get it, that the measure of excellence is your knowledge of the mechanics of the art, as opposed to, are you working on your art? To the extent that, and it actually applies to these DAWs and stuff, you get so engrossed in this minutiae. You could spend hours on tutorials about Logic, or in my case, Studio One or whatever, and not get any work done. And I find, and maybe it's the way I was raised, because I think I've told you I was raised in a family of scientists and engineers. I do a lot of R&D. I tinker. I know that some of these problems have been solved, but I don't understand how the people who solved them. So I say, okay, here's the problem. I know that somebody else has solved it, but I'm going to try to find a way to solve it so that it really becomes part of my DNA. If it's just some formula, I'm going to have a tough time with it. And you know where I learned that? When I went to undergraduate school, I got a D in logic. And my professor took me aside. He said, you have a mind that doesn't belong in this classroom, but you're very logical in the way you present things. And I really thought about that for a long time. Of course, my parents weren't very happy that I got a D in logic, but screw it. The point is that I learned how to think in a very systematic way by kind of an intuitive thing. And I think that's where I'm kind of upbraiding you about your quote unquote inability to read music. You have that intuition, and just because you can't see a chart of 8 bars of whatever and say, oh, it's does not mean you can't read music, because as I'm repeating myself, I know it. I know people who can read those charts, but they cannot read music because it's not happening here. And it certainly isn't happening here. Yeah. It's certainly not happening here for them.
I'm going to jump over to Pavel, thank you, Charles. I'm going to jump over to Pavel, who's I'm just going to go to a couple of people who haven't spoken yet. We're joining Pavel on a walk somewhere. Is it a walk home?
Yeah, guys, I hope it's not too noisy.
No, it's fine. And I can tell you're definitely south of me because it's way darker than it is up here.
Yeah, I'm in Czechia. I'm just going 2 days a week. I'm working as a music educator, so I just wanted to react to what you were saying. I just wanted to say I was so lucky because we have this great. I work with little kids. I work with kids from like 6 to 15. and I teach them saxophone and music theory. And I was so lucky to have this amazing headmaster who is basically, you know, there's a certain pressure from the government and from the rules about how we should teach, and exactly like, you know, everyone should know how to read a score, and there's like exams and everything like that. But he's great in the way that he allows for students who just are not capable of doing that, but they would rather, you know, play by ear. And for a long time, I remember, because I'm teaching for 10 years now, and like 5 years ago, that was not a acceptable thing. And now it's moving to the direction where we are accommodating people who maybe have a, you know, I have a lot of students that have dyslexia, they can't read anything, or they have trouble reading. And I had students with autism, and I had a blind student, or that's not the proper way to say it, right? Visually impaired. And so we work with all these kids, and I think so sorry for the noise. Just one more thing I want to add is that it's just so heartwarming to see the kids to be happy learning these things and to actually come in there and to be looking forward to it. Because as I remember from my childhood, when I was going to these lessons with other friends, we most certainly didn't enjoy it because of the way it was taught, because it was very strict and systematic, and you have to read this. And exactly as you say, we just played scales and exercises. We didn't play songs, or we couldn't play what we want. Today, this kid came to me and he was like, hey, listen, I really love this metal band. And I know I play saxophone, and saxophones don't play metal, but is there a possibility we could play this song? And I was like, certainly, of course. And because I remember myself, when I was starting on a clarinet, I just loved playing metal on clarinet. It sounded horrible, but I just played along with Children of Bodom, and it was the greatest time of my life. So yeah, so just wanted to say that.
Thanks, Pavel. I just love that contribution. And Mark Taylor, over to you, mate. How are you?
Oh, I'm very good. I will say, when I actually gave the composing challenge a try, and oh my God, that was difficult. Oh God. Here's the thing, right? I am so used to using things like, Spitfire and all that. So the only things that were my saving grace during all that was my fridge. My fridge was a saving grace. And not only that, I also, one time I was opening my door whilst I was figuring out what to record. So I opened my door and I realized my door handle does a weird kind of sound. So what I decided to do is I decided to record it, and then I took it over to Reaper, because as it turns out, Reaper has a avocado glitch generator, and oh my God, I learned something with that.
That's brilliant news, Mark. It's genuinely music to my ears, or as Charles would put it, it's music to my eyes. But no, that's the whole idea, Mark. And in fact, I'm starting a new series. I've just bought a new laptop, and I've decided to completely wipe everything. So I'm literally starting from scratch, not a single sample, and I've got samples that go back to the late 90s, and I'm starting from scratch, and it's really, really refreshing. And I'm going, okay, well, what are the things that I always reach for? How do I recreate those or create new ones? And I think that's the whole idea. Starve yourself of resources, become more resourceful, to utter that ad nauseum. David O'Rourke, back to you, sir.
So I'd be in a similar camp to you of self-taught mainly, and then the difficulty when you stand in front of an orchestra with your music and they're sight reading what I know I couldn't do. But I just remember Daniel Barenboim and Vladimir Ashkenazy, and Elliot Carter actually was the third person in the interview. He was in his late 90s at the time, and they made reference without naming the orchestra that were famous for their ability to sight read. And Barenboim said the difficulty with you can't get a performance out of an orchestra like that because they believe they've already nailed it. You know, so it led me to kind of go down a rabbit hole of there are people who are fascinated by precision at the expense of everything else. And then I live in the world of, you know, mainly with jazz musicians, and you know, a lot of my heroes couldn't. Wes Montgomery didn't even know what key he was playing in by name. You know, and the magnitude of the music they make. But the bright side of everything is, I don't think, you know, the younger generation have that same. You know, I would have the same kind of fear walking into the unknown. If are these people going to treat me like I'm an imposter, and you know, because I didn't go to the same conservatory that they went to, or this type of thing. But the young musicians playing symphonic music are people who are playing folk music, are listening to traditional. They're playing heavy metal. They're playing, they have a different grasp of styles and genres, and it has led me over the years to think of music is the language, and everything else is a dialect of it. And as Barenboim said in one of the workshops, I did get to go to one of his conducting workshops. I went for 3 days. He said, with Elliot Carter again there, because he was conducting one of his pieces, he said, music notation is an inexact science. When you think about how people are very opinionated about how Beethoven should be played, or these are all from written accounts. That we don't know how Beethoven wanted the music played. We never heard him play it or take a rehearsal. So while I honestly do admire people who can outread me, which is not very hard. I don't place it the same level of importance in, I think it can impede a lot of people's creativity,
Yeah.
I suppose the final thoughts I have is, you often hear people complaining about music notation apps that anyone can be a composer, or they do the same with samplers sample libraries. But I think the beautiful thing about all of those is anyone can have a go. And I think if you look at a lot of, it would have been the same in Spitfire when they were doing specific instruments. A lot of the sample companies, they show you where the lowest note is. It's an alternative way to learn the ranges of instruments practically. Anyway, I'll stop.
No, it's great, David. And I suspect there's probably some accounts of people having exactly the same attitude towards these newfangled printed scores that people were using, as opposed to learning these things by heart. When they came along, scores are a technology like any other, and they're just a form of communication, and every orchestra will interpret these things slightly differently. And to go on to your thing about Beethoven, I recently saw on Instagram his tuning fork, and he liked the orchestra to tune their A to 451 hertz. I don't know if he liked it really bright, or so he could bloody hear it, or if it was just keeping them on their toes. I suspect it was a mixture of all of those things. Back to you, Elliot. Oh, you're muted, mate.
Wrong button. Once or twice a week, I work out of a school with my music teacher, who was my GCSE music teacher. I don't know what the equivalent for GCSE is in America. But yeah, she's like a really well, kind of classically trained musician. She can sight read anything, and she's fantastic at teaching. She was I had really bad education with relationship with education, should I say, resulting in at university them saying, we're going to have to fail you because written elements, but can we use your music for media as how you should do the course? So yeah. Not a good time at university for that, but yeah. So she's really good at sight reading and the classical elements of it. But she's brought me in because I'm really good at the technical side of things, and it's really encouraging seeing kids who think that music is a barrier to put up Logic on the big screen and to talk them through writing a song, and then getting them to come up and play in front of everyone random notes, just on the white notes in the key of C, and seeing them create a song and having it kind of flesh out in front of them. And after a lesson like that, where they're all going, "Oh my God, I can do this," it's really encouraging. And then over the course of the year, seeing how many of them come back and ask questions, or, "Oh, it's lunchtime. Can I go into the Mac suite and jump onto Logic? And can you help me with this and that?" It's just really, really, really encouraging to see like people who can grasp onto that kind of thing and progress with it. Yeah, just nice story of seeing kids actually engaging with it. In fact, I can't remember how many years ago it was you made, but you made an orchestral cheaters blag sheet.
Yeah.
I printed that off, and that's on the wall in the on Mac Suite.
Brilliant.
Because of one, especially with one kid who's like if he really put his head to it, he could go really far with making music. He's writing like full orchestral scores at 16. It's like you kind of wish you were him doing it at that age. Like he's really, really, really good. But yeah, he kept asking, "Oh, what is the range of a bassoon?" I'm like, check the blag sheet, and in the end, I just put it up on the wall for them all to look at. So thank you for that. That's come in handy at GCSE in Essex.
That's great to hear. Absolutely brilliant, Elliot. And we'll end with you, Jeremiah, before signing off. So what's your thoughts?
Yeah, it just had this whole ending conversation had me having a good think, and I'm looking for just a day job right now. Let's lead that with it, and it had me thinking when I turned to all my other friends that have their layoffs and career changes right now, and the world's in a funny place with this stuff. Plenty of people that are perfectly qualified, some that have gone to school, some that have not. And I think this conversation about gatekeeping, barriers of entry, I think it just permeates everywhere we go in some respect, and it doesn't need to. And I think that's what is collectively nice about this space, is it doesn't feel like there are those barriers, like you're saying, because there don't need to be. I look at my educational history, and it wasn't until I took arts courses in high school when I was younger that I started to get good grades, and I became what was failing at gym in early high school to being on honor roll when I graduated. And it was because I was given the opportunity and the encouragement to do those things that I cared about. And it wasn't, no one turned their nose up at me. And then as you enter adult life and navigate the working world, I think it's really interesting to find that there are employers, and this is my history, that care about seeing the employable qualities in people, and employable in not just a using them way, but in I see potential in this person and they deserve to be given the opportunity. And I think I'm extraordinarily grateful for those people that have decided to take a chance on me and people I know to build out their communities based on a more personable and I think a more necessary qualifier pool of traits, as opposed to an academic approach, though that has merit. I think people that have a academic know-how, that are able to read sheet music in that way, are valuable. If we just have those people like you guys were talking about, it can be quite a boring zone to live in, and it's worth having the opposite, where we are just 16-year-olds in our parents' house in a bedroom with an SM58, recording cover songs and figuring out how to record them in Ableton. You know what I mean? There's value to both in any community, and that's what I love about this. So
absolutely. Well, here, Jeremiah. And something that I'm so excited about with my kids is they learn from the internet. And what's great about that is they're able to, they're not having to go to Berkeley or anything like that. Thank God, jeepers, can you imagine? Shirt off my back. But, they not only get to pursue their interests, but they get to choose the way they learn, and they get to choose their teachers, which I think is a very unique, it's a very new opportunity that we offer them. And I will always fight convention and conditioning. I don't know, I went down a rabbit hole recently. It's so interesting how we just come to accept things and come to accept certain norms. And I just questioned why black and white films look sped up. And the fact of the matter is, back in the day when they were made, they didn't look like that. They weren't sped up. They were between 16 and 18 frames per second. It wasn't standardized until the advent of sound. But the reason why they're now sped up is when sound came along and they fixed it to 24 frames per second, people wouldn't stand for the flickering effect of watching something at 16 frames per second, because there's not quite enough frames for you not to see the bits where the lamp goes off. And that's why movies are called the flicks. So actually, there's an entire era of film that we're watching 6 to 7 to 8 frames per second too fast. And we just accept that. I just wanted to draw us to the week after next. I think it's going to be a big podcast taken up with a lot of stuff. I'm hoping it's going to be the relaunch, the new site, new opportunities, and all of that kind of stuff. So what I was hoping with, it was really successful the last time we did this, is if we could maybe, if we had time, watch a film in our own time. And so we can talk about it next week as this new little strand that we do called Film Club once a month for those of you who haven't watched before. And before like handing over to you guys to suggest films to watch, and the team here have come up with a film they'd love me to see, I'd love us to watch possibly one of my top 5 favourite films of all time. My favourite film directed by Francis Ford Coppola, and that film is called The Conversation. So if you can swat up on that, and for those of you who haven't seen it, you've got a real treat. And then I know that there's one particular thing that we're really going to probably have to talk about, but I'm not going to break. I'm not going to spoiler you on that. But it's an absolutely phenomenal film, and I hope you enjoy watching that. About 3 years ago, you couldn't find it anywhere, but now I've checked. You can get it on YouTube, you can get it on Apple, you can get it on Amazon Prime, all of that kind of stuff. So The Conversation, directed by Francis Ford Coppola. If we could watch that and talk about that next week, that would be great. And do have a go at this competition. As I say, I don't think that many people are going to enter, so there's a good chance of winning. But as always, lots of love to you all, and thank you so much for your brilliant conversation. I look forward to this every week, and thanks for switching from the Thursday to the Wednesday. That will remain the day that we do this on from now on. So see you later.